Both of those ones were set up by a flag. He did nothing. I don't want to hear people saying...
Not to say it was a
Dude,
wrong penalty, but how does it always come down to
nothing?
that?
I'll give him the run, but
That's nothing? And
he
on
did...
one leg? He had one long
Why are we crowning him like he was amazing?
You know he wasn't hurt.
He was okay. He was okay.
faking it the
You
whole
guys are
time.
kidding. I know y'all are kidding.
No, I'm not
John,
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Dorm Debate Podcast. The time has come.
And we'll keep on fighting to the end.
This is uncalled for. I'm like sinking in my chair.
I thought you were going to come out with a
depressed.
Mahomes jersey.
I'm still a Cowboys fan, but I was rooting for the Chiefs in this game. And lo and behold, the Chiefs won.
You were the only one to pick a Chiefs, so fair play to the lone wolf of Dorm Debate.
Both times.
Yeah.
Both
yeah.
times.
As you can tell by my posture, I'm not cropped correctly. I'm like slumping in my chair. I'm very sad.
Sorry.
I'll get up. I'll be professional.
No, nothing personal.
I was like, oh boy, Jonathan's camera turned off, and then I hear the music. And I'm like, it's just been salt in this wound is fresh.
Yeah, we all watched it, and congrats to Jonathan for picking the Chiefs. Congrats to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs for their 38-35 win over the Philadelphia Eagles. Now that's Patrick Mahomes' second title in just 4 years. So he's on pace for you-know-who. He's definitely chasing him. And he's got all the talent to do so. He was MVP of the Super Bowl. He was 21 for 27, 182 yards and 3 touchdowns and 44 yards rushing. And Pacheco, your guy, Jonathan, Pacheco finally got his touchdown, 76 yards and a touchdown for him. Kelsey, it seems like every game he gets a touchdown. He had 6 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown. You just can't stop this guy.
Can't stop him.
No matter what you do, he finds a way to get open.
Exactly.
And then Jalen Hurts on the other side, 27 for 38, 304 yards, a touchdown, 70 yards rushing, and 3 rushing touchdowns. And Devonta Smith, 7 for 100 yards, and A.J. Brown, 6 catches for 96 yards. And that great catch, the long passing touchdown he caught. So let's just get it out of the way first. The holding penalty. Everyone's talking about it. On Monday, even today I'm watching, still talking about it. Sunday, right after the game, still talking about it. And look, if no one knows what happened, I'll just give the scenario. 1:48 left in the fourth quarter, 3rd and 8. The refs call holding at the line of scrimmage by James Bradbury, the cornerback who was covering wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster. Chiefs get a fresh set of downs, and they drain the clock, kick the field goal with about 8 seconds left. The question everyone's debating is, should that ref have called the holding call in a situation like that, or should he have held his whistle, held his flag, and not called it? I do want to preface by saying that I put on Instagram the poll, and I said, would you have called that? If you're the ref, do you call that, or do you let them play? And it was a picture of the hold. And out of the 400 people, 37% said that you have to call that. 37%. 63% said no, let them play. So I'm not saying 400 people judges everybody, but from what I've seen majority of people say let them play. I am on that side, and luckily for many of you watching, we have people from both sides of the argument. Jonathan, you think it should have been called. Caleb and I, obviously, we think that it should not have been called. And I think everyone knows that it was a hold. Like, by the definition of the rule, yeah, it was a hold. But is it egregious enough to call in that situation? Jonathan, I want to hear your thoughts first, and then Caleb and I can talk about it.
Yeah, sure, Jared. So that route that Juju is running is called a whip route. You go 3 yards in and then out. He held him twice in that. If you go back and watch, he held him twice. So everybody saw that. He held him twice. And somebody brought up a good point on a talk show. Even if you're going to cheat a little, you got to wear white gloves. He was wearing black gloves on a white jersey. So
I did see that. Bill Belichick tells his cornerbacks to wear gloves the same color as the opponent's jerseys.
Exactly.
That's a high IQ thought. I could see that making a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the Eagles didn't do that. The Chiefs did do that.
Yeah, and so it was clear. And again, early in the game, Bradbury held him on a crucial 3rd down, but the refs let him go. Like they let it go. It looked like a flag, or a pass interference to many people.
That one looked more obvious than the other one.
Yeah, but they're like, all right, we'll let it go, whatever. This one, again, like the route, it's like the whip route. In order to run it properly, you need that full speed to go 3 yards in and then go back out. He held him twice when he was going in and then when he was going out to break into the ball. And yeah, Patrick Mahomes maybe overthrew it a little bit, but you still got to give him a shot to go get it. And he didn't give him a shot. And so the rules are the rules. Like I was saying, yes, it's annoying, but that's what happened. He held him, and he even said he held him twice. He held him twice. And so it's annoying given the circumstance, and it's crucial. It's a crucial play, right? But look, if you see something, you got to call it. You can't just swallow your whistle and not call anything. You have to call it. It was there. It happened. And it's unfortunate it happened. And people may argue that, hey, the Chiefs they've been getting lucky these past few games with the Bengals person pushing Mahomes out of bounds and then them kicking a field goal to win the game. And then in this situation, it sucks, but like the rules are the rules. He held him. It's unfortunate it happened, but you can't blame the refs and say, oh, they shouldn't have called that. It was a flag. They had to call it. If they didn't call it, then there'd be uproar because they wouldn't be doing their job. Follow the rules. Everybody gets the rule book. Everybody knows the rules beforehand. You got to follow the rules. And hello, John. Nice to see you. You got to follow the rules and call the game. That they did their job. And people are like, oh, throughout the game, they didn't call certain things and all that. Maybe they didn't see it. It's not like they intentionally say, okay, we saw that flag, but we're not going to call it. Sometimes they don't see it. This one, everybody saw it. If you actually see it as a ref, the guy was holding him, you got to call it. You can't just say, oh, this is Super Bowl. This is going to be a crucial play. I'm not going to call this. No, that's not the rule. That's not the way they train them to do. And so, yeah, I think those are the excellent play by the officials in terms of, calling it. And the officials, they also interviewed him after and they said, was there any debate among you guys whether you should throw the flag or not? They're like, no, there was no debate. It was clear. He held him. And we didn't have to debate about this. It was easy. And so people will find anything to say. I guess maybe they don't like the Chiefs because they keep on winning. No. Last year when the Chiefs beat the Bills, they're like, oh, it's overtime. If you give the Bills another opportunity, they would have scored 2. All that, they changed the rules for the Bills. They didn't make it past the division. They lost in the same round they lost last year, despite the rule changes. So they bring everything against the Chiefs every year. Guys, let's just face the facts. All right, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs they're here to stay for the next few years. Let's just watch greatness and stop using little small things like the holding. Like that's not like a big deal. It was a flag.
It was small enough for Juju not to notice. I believe it was on a Orlovsky show. They were saying like Juju didn't even realize it was a hold till he saw Mahomes being mad about it. And he's like, oh, I'm going to pretend, which the opposition point was fair. It was like, you don't have to realize a penalty to call it. But this goes to the bigger issue. I think as obviously I'm biased as an Eagles fan, but I found it encouraging to see across different personalities, commentators, both Eagles fan and then people who don't even care about the Eagles or the Chiefs, outside opinions. Even Moist Critical on YouTube. He's a gaming YouTuber, but he does news. And after the game, he's from Florida. He doesn't care about who won. But he was saying the bigger issue is when these ticky-tack penalties, these over-conservative calls that other refereeing teams wouldn't call and hadn't called all game determine the outcome of games. Like I think as a fan of football, the argument's not really whether it was a holding call or not. It's whether this is good for the game, that it goes down to what can be a call, like a ticky-tack penalty. Like on any play of the game, if rules are rules, you could look at every play in the NFL and find something to penalize. So there's a reason why they don't challenge. There's a reason why coaches can't challenge penalties, because there could be a big, you could give up a big play, and then there'd be something that on the field that's like a little, block in the back. You put a hand on his back, that's technically a block in the back, whatever. So there's always something. But then it's the opposite, where in a game that big, that exciting as it was, come down to something that wasn't clear and obvious, wasn't egregious, that Juju even himself didn't realize, that type of play does require a bit of basketball moves. Like, there's going to be some of that. But, my debate as an Eagles fan is, obviously I'm biased, but my debate's not that it wasn't holding, but there have been holding where like they're clearly impeding the receiver, where the ball could have been catched. Mahomes overthrew it, period. I don't think it was the way to bait it. I think he overthrew it outside of being held. And then it wasn't a hold that was, it's kind of, if they hadn't been calling that all game, you set the tone as the refs. Like Bradbury did say, I can't say whether one hold or two holds to what Jonathan, you were saying, but for the one in question that I saw him talk about, he said he hoped they'd let it slide. And it wasn't like a way, like, I hope I get away with it, but more like, as a quarterback in the NFL, we know this throughout the regular season. You know what refs will call, but they have to at least be consistent so that the cornerbacks can know, like, all right, this officiating crew is going to be really conservative and call everything.
Sometimes they don't see it, right? Sometimes they don't see those calls. And
but that's the point, is that's the problem, is seeing it. It's like the rules are rules, yes, but then if that's the case, we should be able to challenge for penalties. But then it's like, well, we know not to do that because there's going to be probably somewhere on the field is going to be a penalty somewhere. And if you looked at every little camera, even on the critical plays of anything, you could look at a holding on an offensive line. Like even offensive linemen in interviews have said there's probably a little holding on every play in the NFL. So it's like not a matter of whether they see it or not, because you have the cameras to do it. It's more just in the basis of the game, we can adjust the rules so that it doesn't come down to ticky-tack penalties like that. Because it's frustrating as an Eagles fan, because I think, for those who don't know, I work at Wawa, my day job. And I worked the day after the Super Bowl, and it was a very sad environment. But I was encouraged, and obviously I can't wear it because I'm in uniform, but a lot of people wearing Eagles gear. And I think it's because, as an Eagles fan, I think we can hold our head high, that we didn't lose on a blunder. We didn't lose. Like, you can make debates about getting to that point that we could talk about the penalty, more than even the team has talked about. But, they put up a good fight. For all this talk about an easy schedule and not, I was just more disappointed. Obviously, an Eagles fan, they didn't win, but more as a fan of the game of football. Like, say what you will about the head. Like, for me, it sucks that every achievement that Mahomes and the Chiefs and Andy Reid, I like Andy Reid, might have legitimately won on their own merits, that all of that to me is overshadowed by this dumb thing in the NFL that is these ticky-tack calls, these over-conservative calls that can determine the outcome of a game. And I think it's not the question of whether it was a holding, but whether that's just something you call. Even Olsen, the commentator on the game, was talking about like, oh, that's so little, just let them play. Yeah. It's just a collective groan.
He clearly
He's a Panthers player. He doesn't care.
And even when the Rats to kick the field goal, he was trying to jinx him. He's like, I'm not trying to jinx him. He's a former teammate of mine, but you could tell he wanted the Eagles to win.
And
what do you mean? He's a former teammate against his former teammate? No.
And to build off of that, I mean, as a Michigan fan, when Michigan plays Ohio State, when Michigan plays Michigan State, in those rivalry games, you hear a lot about how refs have to adjust to the physicality of that game, and they're trying to anticipate how physical it's going to be, and they adjust. They're not going to call these type of fouls like what we saw in the Super Bowl, because no, 100% it is a foul, but to the point of how egregious is it? That's the definition of what we're trying to talk about here, because in a game like a rivalry game, in a game like the playoffs or
the Super Bowl,
as big stage, the Super Bowl, it's going to be physical. That's how it is. It's fourth down, third quarter. It's going to be physical.
It's not fair to the receiver then.
Did he completely clearly pull him back? No, he ran his route just fine. It's so little.
It's a complicated route.
To the point. It was so little to the point where, Caleb, you mentioned it. Juju, you watch the replay. He just runs back in the end zone after the ball is overthrown, and he just turns around.
He knows it's overthrown anyway.
Well, uncatchable ball is a whole other debate too. Then,
if it was as obvious as he thought, he would have been like this, pointing at the ref, turning to the ref, saying, "Oh my God!"
The ball wasn't close enough. Why did he do that?
The NFL refs during that game had established a physicality of play to where Bradbury, like you mentioned, Caleb, had said, "Okay, we've played 4 quarters. I know these refs aren't going to call it. They've shown that they're going to let us play. It's going to be physical." And he does what he always does, and he may have held a tiny bit, which, yes, it's a flag. But are you kidding me? At the line of scrimmage, you're going to call a hold like that to basically end the game. That better be as obvious and as holding him back to not run his full route as possible.
That was
Because
running his full route. That's a 3-yard in.
It wasn't.
if you watch
wasn't that bad.
if you watch it full time, you don't even notice that he loses any speed or anything. He's completely fine. And
Fair
if
enough,
it
he
was
probably still beat if the
And
if
if
the
it-
ball
if-
was better thrown, might have caught it.
and the one thing that I saw is Emmanuel Ancho said this on his show, that if you're driving and you're going 56 and a 55, you're not going to get pulled over. Are you breaking the law, and can you get pulled over?
You can't.
100%.
No,
But
you can't.
if
It's
you
the same
go-
logic though. It's
If you go
technically speeding.
65, if you pull him back, if you go 65 and a 55, we're going to pull you over, because that's of course that's dangerous, and or the pulling back is too egregious to ignore. And in a situation like this, where this penalty that you call is going to decide the game, which it did, you better be 100,000% that this is impeding on Juju's route, which in
Okay.
my opinion, I disagree with.
in a
Okay, that
clear and
same logic.
obvious way, egregious too. Like because
That
we've
same-
seen holding plays where it's very, it's a legal question too, like you're saying, because legally, if it's a like the speed limit example, the police can pull you over, but we all know in the way of having a safe road that going the speed of traffic is also legal. You know, like there's determined things that allow this, and it's the issue of having that standard be set, like having precedence, and the refs didn't determine it because it could go the either way. The problem with the NFL and the way they do this is the fact that, and it comes down to, if the rules are the rules, it goes back to referees being rulers rather than officiators. Like they do set the tone. They do determine the purpose of the rules, and the way they're written is not like a textbook analysis of like, well, technically the grip here, he had one finger curled, so that is a hold technically by the, he's a grasp of that's considered a grasp of a jersey. Like, no, it's meant, the rules are there so that a guy who's holding a receiver is like, who's beat isn't pulling him down and dragging him to the ground, and that's okay. But it's also like there is a physicality, there is a determination. The purpose of the rules are that there's free and fair play. And I think the problem with the officiating in that sense of something small, albeit textbook right, is that you'll see on the biggest stage, the referees could very easily just determine the outcome of games if it's that close, if it gets that close. And I don't think that's okay for competition. Like if this was the other way around and it was the Eagles getting this, as an Eagles fan, I'd be happy. Same way the Chiefs, I don't expect the Chiefs to decline the penalty in a sportsmanlike way. Like it's the way the game is. We know. My thing is, just as a fan of football, it shouldn't come down to what the referee decides to arbitrarily enforce. If they had been calling that all game, then that's a different story. It's not unlike, and it's different than the Bengals game, because the Bengals, that they were already going to hit a field goal, it just made it shorter. I think he still would have gotten it anyway. This is a different debate because you're going into, and for me, it overshadows a lot of what the Chiefs did well. I saw a lot of headlines of giving up a 10-point lead. I'm like, I know that's a storyline, it's a headline, but that's kind of standard football. Like that's, and I'm not saying it's standard, but like that's not a crazy.
And
Like,
I'm not saying the Chiefs don't deserve it. Like,
Yeah,
who's
it
to say that?
well,
they
Who's
were
to say
playing-
that the Chiefs defense could have stopped Jalen Hurts and
Well,
they would have lost by
guys,
a field goal?
I
Let me
wanted
just-
to
I'm not
see a
saying
good.
that.
I wanted to see a good
Let me-
game.
Let me just come back with you on,
Exactly.
the,
I
on
want
that
to see
drive,
it end on merits, not on luck.
on that driving example, right? The speed.
Yeah.
If you're going like 57 and it's like speed limit's like 56, right?
Yeah.
It depends on the route. Okay. So say you're going maybe 2 miles higher than, like, say it's 20, and then you go 22 in like a preschool or elementary school where you're picking up kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They're gonna call. You're gonna get a ticket because there's kids there. Same thing. This is a route. This is a whip route. It's very sensitive to any pulling and holding. So if somebody pulls you, then you got to call it on that route specifically. Maybe if it was a go route or something and they hold them a little bit, okay, they're probably gonna call it. But this route is really sensitive, and so yeah, it's just like that. It's just like this speed.
The ball hadn't
speed
even
limit
left his hand
No,
yet,
no,
though.
you,
Like,
you
it
can't
was-
adjust penalty because again, the
It
rules
slows
are the
them down.
rules. You can't adjust the rules to what kind of route they're playing because we're not asking refs to like know that's a whip or a go. I think it just goes into like what you're call. If they had decided they're gonna be strict, the quarterbacks know that maybe they wouldn't be that. When he said let it slide, it's because he knew it was a slidable hold. Like, it wasn't egregious, and he's like, "Oh, what is this? I clearly impeded the receiver, and he couldn't get to the ball to be catchable." Like, no, he was like, they set the tone throughout the whole game, and it just what sucks for me is because we talked about this last week, and I think Jared, you were texting about this. We've been talking during debating. But I feel like, Jared, you pointed out that I've liked Hurts a lot this season, but there's been talk of him being a game manager, and you were waiting for that Heisman moment that like come through clutch. And I've seen clutch moments throughout it playing, but for him, so this is what I'm getting to about the 10-point difference. Like, yes, the Chiefs, there are good reasons why the Chiefs ended up beating us. I just hate that it ended that way. At least beat us on merit, on what you have. Because this is what I'm trying to say, is regardless of whether the Eagles or the Bills or the Bengals or whoever, it shouldn't come down to an officiating decision that's so small, unless it's clear and obvious.
It didn't come down to that. That was the last thing you guys saw.
Well, that's
what it came down to was Jalen Hurts fumbling. If he didn't do that, you would have won the game.
I would like to show you.
That was a 7-point swing.
I would like to show the court.
That's the last thing everybody remembers. So it's frustrating. But there was a lot of things that led up to that.
There were, and that's why I think it's, the defense didn't play as well. There are good reasons. I want you guys to look at your phones and look at this picture of Jalen Hurts on the fumble, getting a face mask. Now, the refs
that was after the
should have called it. Should have called it, right? If we're being very specific. This is the bigger issue. Still would have been a touchdown. Still wouldn't have been a touchdown. But that's my point. The point's not that he shouldn't have fumbled. He shouldn't have fumbled.
Established a physical play right then and there.
Well, it goes into what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I want to. That's what I want to talk.
Wait,
John.
John's joined us late. He's ill, but I want him to speak because he is.
I came in late. I'm not feeling great, as you could probably hear from my voice. But Caleb, I'm sorry about how the game ended. I don't agree with it. And what I want to say first is that I'm a Giants fan. I don't like the Eagles. They're one of my least favorite teams. They stopped the Giants from getting to the playoffs when they put Nate Sudfeld in, and they beat us 3 times this year. They're a good team, but I don't like them, right? And fine, the Chiefs won. Mahomes is good. There's no debating. He's the best player in the NFL right now. But you can't end the game like that. And Jonathan, two out of 2 people on this podcast right now that aren't biased. You have bias towards the Chiefs, and Caleb has bias towards the Eagles. Jared and I have no bias, and we're both saying that you can't end the game like that. But what I want to say is, let's say you're driving. Let's go back to that example. And let's say it's 40 miles an hour. And let's say it's on a random road. It's not in front of a school. It's just driving by some stores. And you see a cop on the right-hand side, and the speed limit's 40, and you're going 50. The guy in front of you is going 50. You're like, oh, you see the cop, you're like, oh, I'm going 50, and then you drive by, and you're like, oh, okay, he's letting 50 go. Then the next day you drive, and the guy in front of you is going 50, and you go 50, and you're like, all right. And then the next day, let's say you're driving 50, the cop pulls you over, and you're like, whoa, like, I was going 50 every other day. Like, every other day up until right now, I was going 50. So why is he pulling me over?
Are there more cars there? What's some of the days?
No.
No variables have changed in this scenario.
The thing is, Bradbury had an even worse hold on Juju. Remember, he pulled his arm on third down. That should have been. If you're not going to call that, you can't call the one at the end because that one was worse.
They might have been trying to make up.
So you can't. If you're going to make a call like that, like Jared
said, it better be like an arm holding.
It better be this hold was probably a 3 out of 10 rating. It better be at least a 7 out of 10. And I know you're saying, oh, you can't just look at the clock and be like, oh, because it's late, you can't make that call. But you kind of have to in these scenarios. The refs reserve the right to make these calls in the last 2 minutes, and it's a little shady because we know that Brady just retired. The NFL's looking for their next GOAT for people to watch and stay on the screen. Not to say that it was rigged and they wanted Mahomes to win, but it seemed like that was the first thing that came to my head was like, oh shoot, they just want that's how bad it was. I was like, they want the Chiefs to win. But I will say, if you ask me who the better team was, I would say the Chiefs were the better team. They made less mistakes. So I think the better team won, but you can't end the game on that.
Again, look, if you see something like that, you got to call it. And yes, you said, oh, it was a worse thing earlier. So you're going to allow the defensive back to continue to hold every single play because there was a worse.
Well, yeah, if you
holding
let him
earlier,
go
you
50,
can't
if you
do
let
that.
him go 50 miles an hour 3 days ago, then you got to let him go
That's what I'm
50
saying.
again.
I think what John's is regardless of, I think the issue is accountability. Like you can't challenge under 2 minutes, and we know that you can't challenge as a coach. You can't challenge for a penalty either, just any time in the game. And it's just the idea that
Unless
in the
it's
final,
pass interference.
unless yeah, but it's just the idea of letting it go down to refs. Like some officiating crews will see that and just not call it. And like you said, 3 out of 10, like textbook definitions. It's just there's no accountability. It's like it very easily allows corruption or what
Well,
sucks is as a fan of football or just having a good game. It was such a good game. Any of the narratives coming out of this story for me is overshadowed. Like obviously I'm sad as an Eagles fan, but it was a 10. Eagles gave up 10. Eagles defense kind of capitulated in the second half. Fair enough. I mean, but say this: after the Chiefs went up 8 points, Eagles answered. Jalen Hurts had his Heisman moment. At that, with like a couple minutes in the fourth against the Chiefs, we had to get a touchdown and convert a 2-point. And the Eagles did. We had the team to do it. After all this talk about Jalen Hurts not being the guy to make a deep throw, and he did a couple times this game, being historic numbers, like we saw Hurts answer the call. And it wasn't like with the Bengals game and that penalty, like it hurt them, but they were already in field goal range. This wasn't to seal the game either. It was just time management. And we know in the final 2 minutes, time is such a factor, and it's so easy that for the refs to not have accountability and change the outcomes of these games when you're being over conservative, and it's very easy to lean. And I think as a fan of football, I wanted to see, that you could argue that Eagles gave up a 10-point lead, which is kind of standard football, but then you could have to say, well, the Chiefs gave up an 8-point lead with minutes to go in the fourth. We were about to see a great game. It's saying nothing of as bad as the Eagles defense might have done in the second half, as they got figured out a little bit with overcompensating on some of the swings and motions. Fair enough. There are good reasons why the Chiefs got to where they were. They're a great team. But the Chiefs also, if you will, using the headlining term, gave up an 8-point lead too in the fourth when it mattered more instead of at the half, which is, arguably time's the biggest factor in the NFL.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see, and that defense would have held the Chiefs to a field goal, because that would have been fourth down for a field goal, and the Eagles would have had a minute and a half to do something to potentially get into field goal range, score a touchdown. I wanted to see Hurts and offense answer, and that Chiefs defense defend that. Like, and if we fumble it, if we don't get to field goal range and we lose that way, then that's the game. But at least let the game determine the game, not these textbook things. I just don't think it's good for life, for the game of football, that these, you heard Greg Olson on the big stage even say it, like, let them play. Like, we know we can determine rules that can fix this, that can be smart about this. In soccer, there's a, advantage. Like, even if there's a foul, but clearly the game's exciting and there might be able to do something down the line, they'll let the team that's fouled keep playing. And obviously football is much different than that football. But we could be smart about this. Like, don't give the refs such autonomy. It's very, not to say they're corrupt. I'm not, going that far, but that's
you're giving them too much power and late in the game.
And no accountability, because it can go against the Chiefs just as much. Like, Mahomes could say something mean to the ref, and the ref's like, oh, well, final 2 minutes, there's holding somewhere, and he could call it, and then the camera will find it. And it's my debate is not that it's holding or not, or X or Y, but be consistent, and that they should have accountability.
And the thing is, guys, even though we're still talking about this whole thing, there's a lot that went into this game. Okay, if the Eagles, the thing about having games too close is, like, it can go either way. It's just based on luck and chance. Okay, the Eagles had so many opportunities to put this game away. They were up by 10. Patrick Mahomes hurt his ankle, and the Eagles defense didn't sack him one time. Not one time. The 70-sack defense didn't sack Mahomes once. Just give him one sack, and they didn't do it. And then on top of that, they talked about this even before the game. The biggest punt return in Super Bowl history, the Eagles gave that up. Why? Why was it that easy for Patrick Mahomes to score the second time? Because the special teams didn't execute. And so there were many times like that, many instances like that throughout the game that cost the Eagles. This is just the last thing everyone remembers. And people are like, oh, we want to see Hurts get, another shot. Okay, that's fine, but the Chiefs strategically were milking the clock to allow a less of a chance for that to happen. Once they got that flag, then they could milk the clock. And so nobody said the Chiefs were going to do that. They could have scored. They could have hiked it and scored that next play. and then the Eagle, still
Yeah,
kind of went
Eagles
back
should
and
have
forth.
acted. Should have pushed him into the end zone. Pacheco was smart to hit the
Yeah.
one.
McKinnon.
Exactly.
They should
So
have. They should have. It's not illegal,
John-
right? If cornerback
Jonathan,
better
tackles
game
him.
management. It's just
look,
better game.
the Eagles-
The Chiefs
you
have been
can't-
doing this. They're just
The
good.
Chiefs have
they're
good
at
reasons
game
Yes,
to
the
get into that
Chiefs-
point. You can't argue they sealed the game though, and that's my argument. Like there are reasons the Eagles gave up the lead, even though 10 points is just football. It just happens. It's one score and a field goal, but you can't argue that they sealed the game. Like the punt return was bad, yeah, sure enough, but Eagles
They
defense
didn't
as bad as we
execute.
did. They didn't seal
Patrick
it.
Mahomes overthrew him.
That's
They
what
coulda
I
had
mean.
A touchdown.
And it's
Yeah,
not a
he
dig
did.
on
Patrick
Mahomes or
dude,
Reed or
dude,
the
dude,
Chiefs.
Patrick, can I tell you a secret? Patrick Mahomes do that on purpose. He rather throw.
Were you were
I
you
don't- I
were you
don't doubt
inside his
that he
brain?
actually-
No,
I
no,
don't
no.
doubt
Let me tell you the logic behind that. He did that on purpose because that will give Juju Smith-Schuster could eventually, or possibly went to go get that, and
I
then
know
it
what you're
could have been
trying
out
to
of bounds, and he could have dragged.
Well,
You
yeah,
know how
true,
far
true.
that was? Do you
But that was-
realize how
It was
far?
either,
I
it was
actually
either,
kind of
it was either, it was either Smith-Schuster would have got it or nobody would have got it. He didn't want to risk
fair.
throwing
That's
an interception.
fair.
That's why he
That's
threw
fair.
it.
All right,
I
that's
actually
fair,
kind
but
of thought
way
about this,
overthrown.
and I think
But
he
he
might
was
have
surprised,
purposely
but even-
overdone it.
To his surprise, even he even saw. He even saw. He's like holding. He pointed. He's like, holding. He's like, he's surprised. Like, yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, but once he got the call, he thought in his head like, "Oh shoot, I don't really want to win on that. I shouldn't have really pointed."
no,
You
no,
should've
no.
I
he
was
saw-
there.
he was
Let me
surprised.
tell you, the
He knows-
logic behind that. He knows he doesn't want to win like for no reason.
He's more experienced. He knows. So he's like, okay, I'm gonna throw it. Like, check it there. If he is able to get it, good. If he's not,
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
want to risk it.
And he,
so
yeah,
when
he
when he
knew
saw
that.
the
I don't
holding,
want to
he was
risk
like,
it. I want to.
when he saw the holding, he's like, oh, holding. He's surprised.
I think he
No,
was
but he
baiting
was like,
for it.
I got
It's like
lucky.
last
He was
game.
just trying to get away with
I think
something.
he was trying to bait. I actually thought about this too, and it was smart. Again, this is what I mean. Like, if it was the Eagles, you don't decline the penalty, even like you take it. I think he overthrew it. It was an overthrow. It was uncatchable, which is another
He did
debate.
that
Like,
intentionally.
it was a really bad. If he meant to do it on purpose, like actually try it for the touchdown or convert, it was a very bad throw. I actually do agree with Jonathan on this point that he might have purposely overthrown it to exaggerate the implication of what was a holding and in a way bait it, because we know they didn't want to score too quickly to give Hurts that much time, because they had the momentum. I think in that final minute, what we remember is that the Eagles answered. They got 8 points. They did it, and the Chiefs and the Eagles defense was about to hold the Chiefs to a field goal. Mahomes and Kelsey and all this, as much as they figured out, we're about to be held to a field goal. I think it's smart on Mahomes. I don't knock him for doing this. I think he might have overthrown it on purpose to draw that penalty, which might have, again,
Or
be there.
also-
But we know they
also
didn't want
only-
to score a touchdown because Pacheco nailed it at the one.
Also, he only wanted Smith-Schuster to possibly get that, and nobody.
And
else.
if that was the intention, though, it was so badly thrown, then I can't buy that. Like, it was just so overthrown that even if there was no Bradbury there, I don't think he would have caught. Again, the hold was so little that it's like Bradbury could have not been there, and it would have been uncatchable, in my opinion. So that's like you're it's baiting for the penalty. I think not that he shouldn't do. It's part of the game, but it's just that shouldn't be part of the game. Is my point.
Yeah, my point is it shouldn't have even come down to this.
Not
Okay? It
unfair.
shouldn't
That's
even
what the
come down
Eagles
to
were
this.
talking about.
But
You
that's-
can't argue they sealed it. That's my
Yeah,
debate.
that's unfair because the Chiefs didn't execute their play,
What
and
play?
yet the Eagles get what?
You said
The,
the Chiefs didn't
the
execute.
third down. The third down.
They were about
he
to go
didn't
for.
e-
They were
he
about to,
did not execute the play.
They were going for the third
and yet
time.
they get another chance. But
I mean,
yet
they're
the
going for the
Eagles,
field goal.
when
They're going
they
for
do
the-
something, they get penalized for it, and they don't get a second chance.
that
If it
one
wasn't for
catch
the-
that was
like-
a catch and they
that
called
was
it
a-
incomplete.
Dude, if Mahomes really tried to or wanted to risk it all and complete it on the third down, he would have. He purposely threw it there. So that way, it could only go to Smith-Schuster and nobody
Well,
else.
either way,
Yes,
he
I
missed
agree
it.
with
Why-
that.
either go
He
for
missed
the
it
call.
though.
That's not
He
a
missed
penalty you
it.
call though.
Like the fact that both of his game-winning drives, one against the Bengals and one against the Eagles, both of those ones were set up by a flag. He did nothing. I don't want to hear people
Not
saying,
to say it was a
Dude,
wrong
wait,
penalty,
wait,
but
wait,
how
wait,
does it
y'all
always
said
come
he did
down to that?
nothing?
But
Y'all
how
said
does
he
it
did
always come
nothing?
down to a flag?
he had one long run. I'll give him the run, but
That's
he-
nothing. And
he
on
did-
one leg, he had
We're-
one long.
why
on
are
one
we
leg.
crowning
Okay, stop
him like he
talking
was
about one
amazing?
leg.
Are you
You know he wasn't hurt.
No, he was
You know
okay.
wasn't hurt.
He was okay.
faking it the
You
whole
guys are
time.
kidding. I know y'all are kidding. Are
No,
you
I'm
kidding?
not
was-
Jonathan, do you really think he was hurt?
Yes, you didn't see him grimacing in pain on the sideline.
One time.
That was such a fake. How did he come back on the field the next play and start sprinting everywhere?
He was
We all know-
completely
we all
What did
know
they
why.
do?
We
fine.
all know
Why?
why.
No, he
We all know
just-
why.
He got his shot.
We all know why. He purposely didn't say when they asked him, how were you able to come back? He's like, oh, I didn't cut. And he's like, we all know what he did.
So
He
why are
was
you calling him? Why are you calling
Not
him
an
on one
FDA
leg
approved-
if he couldn't feel it anyway? If he couldn't feel it, he's not on one leg.
I can't say the FDK approval.
Yeah, look,
No, Mahomes is great. It's just for me.
he made the
it-
plays.
It taints it.
Yeah,
It taints the victory.
Even if he wasn't hurt, the plays he made, completing the ball, going and like pushing it down the field.
Wait, Jonathan, hold on.
It's
Hold
impressive.
on.
You gotta say it.
He's a
Who played
phenomenal
better?
talent.
Who played better, Hurts or Mahomes?
Mahomes. And let me tell you
Oh
why.
my- okay.
And I knew you were gonna ask me that. Let me give me some.
Yeah, tell me. All right, tell me.
Okay. Hey, they both played great. They're both elite talent. But now
Just give me stats.
Now we're talking about the big dogs. Okay. Okay. So 304 yards, pass yards by Jalen Hurts. Right. He went 27 of 38. 182 pass yards. Simple. For Patrick Mahomes, he went 21 of 27. And then 44 rush yards for Patrick Mahomes, 70 for Jalen Hurts. The passer rating. Patrick Mahomes' passer ratings was 131.8. Jalen Hurts was 103.4. Mahomes had a better game than Jalen Hurts. They both played great.
Why?
Yeah,
If
but-
it wasn't for that
Better game.
one fumble,
No, no,
a higher
it would have been
passer
And
way
rating.
more.
also, guess what? Hurts had the ball way longer than Patrick Mahomes. Way longer. Mahomes only had like eight possessions.
That's not a testament
and
to
he
good
still
quarterback
scored
play?
38 points. What was that?
That's not a testament to good quarterback.
Yeah,
play.
they were going 3 and out. Chiefs were going 3 and out. That's his fault.
No, I
Dude,
gotta
they didn't have
disagree.
enough time.
No, no,
Hurts
Jared-
had the ball for
Let me
centuries.
say this first.
Well,
though.
Jared,
Let me
yeah,
say this
what's your
first. Mahomes, the reason he had such a good completion percentage and QB rating is because he was throwing check downs and dump downs
Yeah.
for 5
no,
yards.
It was
now
all
you're trying to
short.
find excuses now.
He's
Now
it was
we're
all
talking
short.
average.
Come on,
He was
let's
still
not,
deepest throw.
let's
That's
not
the deepest
pull
crown
up
this
his
guy.
longest
Dude.
pass.
Dude,
Let's not crown this guy for doing below average passes to wide open receivers.
Okay, that second
Everybody was open.
That second touchdown to Hurts. AJ Brown adjusted the ball, and there were two Chiefs defenders on him.
No,
But
he
that was-
threw
that
it
was
to the
luck.
left. He
That
threw it
was
to the
a-
left
that was
where
on
nobody else could
purpose.
get it.
That was on
luck.
purpose.
Dude,
Oh,
that
That
was
was
come on.
luck.
Let's
No,
be honest
no,
now.
no, no.
That was
Dude.
luck.
No,
The Chiefs defender tried to turn around and try to look for the ball. That was when he made a mistake. He should have.
no, that's why Hurts looked.
That's why Hurts threw
That's
it,
why
though.
Hurts threw it left.
And how
That was
come-
He
luck.
threw it away.
So we could say that both things. The
No.
stats. Patrick Mahomes had a better game.
You can't
yeah,
crown
he had a-
Mahomes for
and the
throwing
thing is-
check
and the
downs.
thing
He had a
is,
higher passer rating. Doesn't
Hurts
mean he had a
had
better
a-
game.
And Hurts did have to do more from his team. Like his team caused him to do more. He had to rush more and make those late rushes in the end to tie the game 35-35. But Mahomes had the more accurate game.
No, but what about
131.8.
why won't you just give the credit to Andy Reid? Those two wide open touchdowns.
Wide
That's-
open- okay,
that's
Andy
what it
Reid-
should be.
Mahomes
that's
didn't
it.
do anything. It was all Andy Reid.
Andy Reid had a hell of a
Dude,
game.
Okay,
Or
dude, it was
Schemed
a
up
combination.
everything.
It was a combination of all of them, dude. You have to execute.
Mahomes
those.
didn't do
No,
shit.
You have to execute
No.
those.
I even as the Eagles fan, I can't. Mahomes is a phenomenal talent. Like he is a special player. I can't take away from it. I think it just goes to the body of the game that the Hurts shouldn't have fumbled it. Sure, like that
you.
gave them points. The
That's what-
punt return hurt us a lot, but then it was a short field for Mahomes. But then you just see the Eagles answer with 8, and the Chiefs' offense just be held to a
Yeah,
field
they
goal.
fought back.
My
They fought
debate
back.
is
They
just
fought
this
back.
whole ending and all these narratives just overshadowed that it didn't come down to football. It came down to
And-
an opinion of a crew on a ticky-tack penalty. And
maybe
it's like
I'll-
football should not end that way. Unless
Maybe
it's
I'll
clear
feel-
and obvious, egregious, you don't let them play. It was such an exciting game. The Eagles had just answered. Chiefs were just held to a field goal. That hurts with a minute and a half. If we lose that way, fair. But
Yeah,
this is not good for football that this happens.
I would have been like, Hurts played a great game and stuff, but I would have been more disappointed if he didn't make a small little mistake in terms of fumbling like that. That's all I'm saying. If he had played
It was
a
a
perfect game,
fluke.
no,
It was a fluke and weird fumble.
a 7-point
Fluke
swing,
and weird.
a 7-point swing. That's
You
that's
want
why
him
they
to
lost.
play. You want him to
That's why
play
they lost.
absolutely perfect.
So you can't. I'm saying
Mahomes has Mahomes never fumbled it.
not in the Super Bowl.
Mahomes up until this,
I don't think so.
Mahomes in the
Mahomes
postseason
had
actually
that
had like
fumble.
more. Well, no,
he
he
had
had
a fumble
more.
AFC Championship.
No, actually, up until except for this game, he had like more picks or something. He would throw a lot more picks in the postseason than the regular season. This game he actually played perfect, if you will. But there was Skip pointing out some of the stats of his TD to interception ratio in the playoffs was worse than the regular season. But that's not my point. Again, my debate as the Eagles fan.
Hurts
Just
had
let it come
AJ
down to
Brown
football.
Hurts had AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Sorry, Caleb, go ahead. But he had both of those guys. Who did Mahomes have? Who
Let
did
me-
Mahomes
Jonathan,
have? See, name me one
Jonathan,
receiver he
look.
had.
We said
what
this
I'm
last
saying
podcast.
is that the Eagles didn't play a perfect game. Hurts fumbled it, returned for a touchdown. They got no sacks, like you said. The return, longest punt return in NFL Super Bowl history. And not only that, but Tony did a certain route to get his touchdown. Sky Moore did the same thing, and they
Same
didn't
thing on the
adjust
other
to
side.
it.
That was like a
Look,
whip.
the Chiefs probably deserve to win. But as a football fan, you've played football. How are you okay with the game coming down to this? Yes, the Chiefs probably should have won and probably would have won anyway. But you can't. How could you not see it come down to that and be like, oh well, that's kind of a little bit stupid.
That's not. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it was a clear hold. That's annoying. If I was a receiver, I'd be annoyed and didn't call that. I'm like, what are you doing?
Nah,
You're gonna let us
even
play?
Juju didn't.
Oh,
No,
come
Juju
on.
was the receiver. He didn't even realize it was a hold. That's my point. If it was a hold that he realized, that was like we've seen
he
holds
realized-
that aren't called that should be called, and that's a moment where that's a different argument we're having. This isn't even to seal the game. We still had 8 seconds. It's just the idea for football to come down to this. It shouldn't.
No, guys, they knew it was a hold. Caleb, he knew it was a hold. He knew it was a hold. But again, he know the ball was so well overthrown that he probably didn't care. He's like, okay, whatever. But it was a hold.
You can still call. You can still act for it. If you hold it, we've seen receivers. I mean, they look for the hold even if it's uncatchable. You can still call that.
On that same note, I watched back last year our Super Bowl recap episode. It was just 3 of us. It was me, Caleb, and John. And I was just wondering what our thoughts were, because I wondered if our same feelings were the same during that game. Because to be honest with you, I couldn't really remember too much about that game. I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't really remember too much. I knew that the Bengals had a chance to win it in the last second or the last minute or whatever. But I was like, I can't really remember. So I rewatched highlights and I watched our thing. And what do you freaking know? That on the game-winning drive, the Rams go down. There were 3 total penalties, all on the Bengals, including one that let me finish my monologue. There were 3, including one on Logan Wilson on a 3rd and goal from the 8-yard line. They called pass interference, and it's the same type of hold that Bradbury kind of had, which was arm behind him and then the other arm right here, and it's across the middle.
Yeah, look,
the
guys.
time. Hey, I'm not finished with the monologue.
Sorry.
The timing on that, it was the 4th quarter with 1:48 left, and minute 48 was this year's. Last year's was with 1:43 left in the game on 3rd down, 3rd and goal. They called the same thing, giving the Rams a 3rd chance. They had 3 total fouls on that. That was the last one to keep them from, if they didn't call that, it would have been 4th and goal. And it would have been, they had to convert a touchdown because it was 4th and goal. So, of course, they give him another chance and they score the touchdown. But yet, it's 2 times back to back. In a span of 5 seconds, 1:48 in the 4th quarter of this game, 1:43 in the last year's game, and they call nearly the same thing on 3rd down on a team that is down. The Eagles were down, or the Eagles were up 10. The Chiefs come back. The Bengals were up 4 at that point, and they end up the Rams getting a touchdown, taking the lead. And the Eagles and Chiefs, we all know, they kicked the field goal to take the lead. And both times, I went on ESPN, I looked at the percentage of chance to win at that point, and the highest that it goes was 78% chance to win for the Eagles when they were up 10. And then I go back to last year, and the Bengals were 79% chance to win when they were up 4 points. And now I don't want to speculate too far, but that's 2 years, right? What has happened in the last 2 years? Well, let me tell you guys.
Tell us, please.
Because there's a huge issue right now in the NFL, and it's that the refs have so much power in the 2 minutes and the end of the game. Because like Caleb, you said, there is no repercussions for these refs. No one can hold them accountable. No one can throw flags. You can't review anything. August 30th, 2021, before the 2021 season, so before Bengals, Rams, before Eagles and Chiefs.
Okay, what happened?
The NFL announced its first ever U.S. sports book partnership with Caesar Entertainment, DraftKings, and FanDuel.
I know where you're going with that.
Over $1.3 billion bet on this year's Super Bowl, and probably a little bit less on last year's. But the issue at hand is there is so much money riding on these games that
Oh, dear.
they can't allow a just free flow of a 2-minute at the end of the game, a 2-minute game going down to the wire, and maybe some fluke thing happening that goes out of the NFL's control. And that's the issue right now. You cannot have like we saw Saints Rams where it was an obvious foul. They did nothing about it because they want to have a control over these games. You cannot have it be just a complete even game because then they will not have it sway in their favor. The game went in their favor in both occasions. Matthew Stafford, the favorite veteran, got his ring. And then you have Patrick Mahomes, the golden boy, as Tom Brady retires, getting his ring. It worked in their favor exactly how they wanted it to. And you saw on those last drives, both with the Rams and with the Chiefs, they saved them and give them second chances, whereas the Eagles and Bengals did not. And that has been the storyline for 2 Super Bowls after the fact that they partner with U.S. sportsbooks. And I personally don't think that is a coincidence at all.
Man.
But we're going to look back at 2 Super Bowls now and say, play of the game. Wow, there it is. A holding call. Wow, play of the game. Logan Wilson, a defensive pass interference on Cooper Kupp. And Cooper Kupp on that, you can watch it, did not raise his hand, did not look over to the ref, did not complain. He was completely fine because they had already established a type of play, a physical play in a Super Bowl like that. And it just so happens that a third down, all of the sudden, under 2 minutes, now they call it under 2 minutes, 20 seconds under the 2 minutes. Now they call it. I don't think
Jared,
it's a coincidence. I
Jared.
don't.
Jonathan,
I
I know
really
you're
don't.
gonna say, I know
It's a
you're gonna
really
say
good
he's
nuanced
crazy,
take, though,
Jared.
but
Jared. I
don't
like
you
the-
think it's a little bit fishy that it's 2 years in a row?
And let me tell you,
and it's something
to
we
see
need to
next
start talking about.
and let me tell you why. And that's an interesting theory. Very interesting. Very entertaining. I feel like getting some popcorn once you tell me that.
Thank you. Thank you. I was
But let-
hoping.
But let me tell you a few things. Number one, guys, towards the end of the game, when receivers and offense is trying to score, the defensive backs tend to hold because they don't want them to score. Okay, they tend to do things like that and try to cheat, and the refs
And that's
keep an
fair.
eye on that.
I
They're
agree
trying to
with that.
keep an eye
That's
out. They're trying to keep
There's some
eyes
truth
out
there.
for that.
Yeah,
They're trying to
that's
look
fair.
out for that. Like, okay, these guys are going to try to cheat a little because they don't want them to score. So let's keep an eye out. That's what
I agree
happened
with that.
these past 2 Super Bowls. And that's number one. And number two, guys, just like in soccer, look at the World Cup, for example. If after the regulation, when it gets to the penalties, anything could happen. You don't want to. That's why many teams don't want to go to penalties because you want to control it. You want to control what's going to happen. You want to win the game. You don't want to leave it to the penalties where 50-50. You could get lucky. You cannot get lucky. Same thing with these games, guys. If the Bengals wanted something to say about it, if the Eagles wanted something to say about it, they would have dominated their opponents. But when you leave it towards the end of the game and it's that close, then it could go either way. Don't put it in those situations like that.
All right,
Both
so
teams had the
all
opportunity.
right, so if it, all
They
right,
did
so
it.
if a game is
So that's
close,
just-
so if a
that's
game
just
is
how
close in
things
the
go.
last 5 minutes, let's say, if the game is, let's say, tied in the last 5 minutes, then whoever wins, it was all luck. Because either team shouldn't have let it get to that point. If they lose, you could just say, "Oh, Chiefs, you shouldn't have let it get to
Chiefs
that point."
coulda-
Or,
yeah,
Eagles, you shouldn't have
exactly.
let it get to that. So
Exactly.
it's just luck. At that point, it's whatever happens. Who even knows? It's random shit.
You don't allow it to get to that point. If you don't allow it to get to that point, because at that point anything can happen in terms of time management. Things could happen. Somebody could get injured. Like different things could happen. And so you have to. That's why you have to dominate. That's why you have to dominate. And that's why the Eagles did a good job the first few games getting to the Super Bowl. They just dominated. Like we're not going to worry about
in the
any of that
first
small stuff.
half. It's clear dominance, but let me add it. Jared, thanks for pointing that out. I'm not going to go so far to say there's blatant corruption or that it's
How about
it
you?
certainly smells fishy. But I think Jonathan, you do bring up good points about defensive backs in those moments. I think Bradbury admitted it. Like that's a real thing, and I think what's getting at the heart of the issue is and I'm not saying there is or isn't, but the way the rules are now and the way these things can be called, as we saw this game and last year, it's too easy to allow corruption to enter if it were to enter. Like it'd be very easy to let it go down to a ref's decision like that, and I don't think the game of football should. I've been saying all playoffs, like I haven't been underestimating our opponents, even as the Eagles fan. I did believe there was a path, like looking at the textbooks, that we could have blown them out. But we saw a brawl. I wanted a brawl. And we saw that. Like you said, there were reasons. There are good reasons the Eagles went up, as a crazy time in possession in the first half, and there's also reasons why they came back 8 points, and there's also reasons why the Chiefs capitalized on the mistakes and also were good and efficient in the mistakes and the chances they got. But when I say I want to see a brawl, I want to see the game sealed by good old fashioned football, not the opinion of an officiator on an over conservative call. I don't think that's good for football. And when you add the element of gambling, it's too much temptation. I don't want to say temptation, not to say the refs were bribed or anything, but it's too easy for the game of that level, of that much money and magnitude, to come down to that, the perception of someone's opinion versus what's true, what's good for the game, what's good for competition, and what's fair and accurate. What's clear and obvious is also part of the metric for when they reviewed these all season. For it to be blown aside for what could be go either way. And that's the problem. That if it's a close game, as what you kind of want as a football fan, if it's not your team, even if it is your team, you kind of want to see that. It shouldn't come down to ticky-tack penalties. Like, of those three Bengals penalties, I'd have to rewatch and see, maybe there was something there. Like, maybe by the textbook, there's something. But that's the problem. On every play, you'll find a penalty that goes in either direction. So the problem, if you ask me, is that in those, there's no accountability. There's too much power, John. Like you said, John. There's any play you could find something on the Jalen Hurts fumble. If you're going to use that as a reason, not you specifically, Jonathan, but just in general, that's part of the narrative as to why the Chiefs won, and it's fair enough. But you'd also have to look at the face mask that wasn't called. If the rules are the rules, if the rules are the rules, the NFL could enforce every rule at every time.
Okay,
there's a
but how about
reason they
this?
don't do the cameras on every single matchup, because there's going to be something.
But how about this? Eagles converted a couple times on fourth down, right? Like 4th and 1, 4th and 2. The great Tony Dungy, legendary Hall of Fame coach, he said to all the people saying the refs shouldn't have called holding on the Eagles with 150 left, that's like saying they shouldn't have called the Chiefs D for being offsides on 4th and 2.
They were about to not to until Kelsey got up and was like, "All right, we're not doing this play." You guys see that? It looked like they were going to let him. They looked like they were going to let him play.
Yeah, penalties are penalties.
Penalty. The
penalties
problem
are penalties whenever they're committed.
No.
If you see it, you have to call it, even in the Super Bowl.
The problem with offsides is it's black and white. You're either offsides or you're not. With penalties,
he's holding, right?
No,
but you said the word seeing.
The thing is though, is with plays like, or penalties like holding, penalties like roughing the passer, penalties like defensive pass interference. We hear it all the time. Oh, it's up to the ref's discretion if he's going to call it or not. Oh, that could be called. Even as far as things like a catch. Nobody knows what the heck a catch is anymore. And you have to look at that and say, well, I don't know. I would call it a catch in my opinion, but we should go back to look at these refs and this ref, and it's not clear. And roughing the passer, oh, he did hit him, but is he driving his shoulder into the... Nobody knows. And there's too much gray area in those type of penalties. Offsides, it's black and white. You're either offsides or you're not. There's a line there. But as far as holding and defensive pass interference and roughing the passer, even a catch.
I have a feeling if they called that penalty and the Eagles ended up winning, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because let me tell you why. Most of America, most of the world wanted the Eagles to win. And they don't like the Chiefs. No. That same thing happened last year when the Chiefs beat the Bills. Oh, they're like, oh, the overtime rules aren't fair. You need to change it. They changed it.
No, I like Mahomes. I like Andy Reid. I picked this matchup. I wanted to see it come down to football. But Jonathan, I'll let you go in a second, Jared. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I think you hit the nail on the head, Jonathan. I've seen a couple people say this way, and I think you're not wrong in saying it this way. But this goes to the problem. If you see it, you got to call it. The problem is perception. When I talk about corruption or seeing it, it gives too much power to the eyes, which, it's like, oh, now I see it. Now I don't. What Jared's touching on is the problem, is like, it's too easy for corruption or nuance or opinion to influence the outcome of these games, because that's kind of what it is, where it's like you're looking the other way is what we say. So it's very easy to, you've seen those plays too, where like they're looking in the direction they don't see it. They might not see it. The problem is perception, that the camera sees everything. So there are ways we could fix this. The NFL can get creative and find some sort of, every solution has trade-off. I always say this, but the eyes lie. And it's also like, you can look the other way. The problem is that in those final minutes, it shouldn't come down to whether you see it or not. It should come down to what's good for the game, what's fair, what's accurate. You could get ticky-tack and go camera sees everything, call everything. Well, then it's no fun. But then if you go the other way, well, it's like, well, if you see it, well, then you're giving power to people who could have different agendas and motives. Like let there be a balance and some accountability, some a balance of power, if you will, to use a
Yes.
social studies word. And I think
And-
that's the problem. Is I'm obviously bitter as the Eagles fan, but I think that's the problem. Jared, you were about to say?
Yeah, and to build off of that, John and I talked after the Super Bowl. Like, it's annoying that this is the biggest play of the game, and this is what everybody's talking
It's
about.
not the biggest play of the game.
But it's what everybody's talking about.
It's what
It's
sealed
what
the game.
If you
it's
look
because,
on-
the game.
it's because 85% of the world wanted the Eagles to win, so that's why they're talking about this.
No,
You flip it
no,
around.
even-
If the Chiefs lost, nobody would care.
Jonathan,
No,
so
no,
if this
no.
was
Nobody would
if the
care.
penalty was earlier
know-
in the game, would everybody be talking about that?
Not really.
No.
But if the
It's
Chiefs
timing.
had lost and the Eagles had miraculously won, they won like in the last 8 seconds or something.
most
Nobody would be
most,
talking about this.
most
Nobody.
people. I mean, I live
Right?
on the East Coast, and I have a lot of Eagles fans. But most people don't like Eagles fans. They want to see them lose.
No,
But the
not in
fact
this
of the
game.
matter
everybody,
is,
anybody you
I-
ask
No.
said Eagles. Anybody I asked said Eagles. Literally.
No, dude.
But-
Eagles are
okay,
Philly
so if
fans,
that's-
we know no one likes us, we don't care is the motto.
Yeah.
Like that's
But
it's hard to
that's
argue
even
that.
if that's the case. Let's
Still
just
the
say
fan
people
favorite.
wanted Eagles and whatnot. It's still the biggest story coming out of the Super Bowl. You can't even deny it because it's
If
on
the
every
Eagles-
freaking media publication
If
everywhere.
in the last,
And
in the
that's
last
the
8
issue.
seconds, in the last 8 seconds, if they were able to pull off a miracle and won the game, nobody would be talking about this at all.
Sure,
Yeah,
but that's
yeah.
unfair that you're going to give them 8 seconds.
Yeah,
like
give them 8
that's
seconds
pretty
instead of
bad.
a minute and a half. I'm sure the Chiefs will take that deal.
But it's like, again, it's like back
It
to
shouldn't come down
back.
to
It's like,
officiating.
yeah, like it's just not good.
It's
Like
just
the
biased.
NFL
We need
hasn't.
guys, we need to get our bias out because I'm saying like we all like.
I'm
most
not an
people-
Eagles fan.
Jonathan,
we're-
I have
y'all
no
wanted
bias.
Eagles
I
to
don't
win.
want the
Hates
Eagles to win.
Eagles.
I'm happy the Eagles lost.
know,
I am
no,
happy
no,
the
no.
Eagles lost.
Y'all know y'all.
There is no. I
John,
picked
you're
Patrick
wearing a
Mahomes.
Cowboys jersey.
I know. I know.
No,
So I'm
Patrick-
out of this. I don't have a dog in this race.
No,
I'm-
I
I
like
picked-
either. I don't
Mahomes.
either.
I wanted to see it come down to the test because I get obviously as an Eagles fan, there's that bias, but I wanted to see it come down to merit. Like in all the other games,
It's
I said this
it's,
last
it's
year.
just
I
an
hated the
NFL
overtime.
fan, just like
Yeah, I
off
hated the
surface
overtime
level.
rules period because I wanted like when Mahomes beat with 11 seconds, they came back and beat. Like that's good football. I want to see that happen, and we didn't get to see that this game. Like with the
But no,
Falcons
that-
come back, you saw the Falcons blunder against the Patriots. Like
Caleb,
you didn't get
that-
to see the Eagles answer.
Caleb, that game you're talking about, people complained about the overtime rules. That was the story of that game.
They
Rather
they
than
were bad.
Bears and Mahomes
8
and
out of
Chiefs.
10. 8 out of 10 postseason overtimes went to the coin toss winner, and we talked about this last podcast last
See,
year.
see, I don't know why.
And they fixed it. They fixed it. That was what we talked about last
And they
year.
fixed
that
it, and the
shouldn't come
Buffalo
down
Bills
to a
were-
50-50.
they
It
still,
shouldn't
the
come
Buffalo
down to
Bills-
a 50-50 thing.
and they still lost like that same round. So it
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
I'm
Guys,
not a
the
Bills
best team
fan. I'm an
end up-
Eagles fan.
And I'm saying
This
the
is-
best team ends up winning. Like that's just
You
how
cannot
things go.
argue. The
But
problem,
it shouldn't.
we talked
It
about this
shouldn't
last year.
be.
Right, we're
It
not
shouldn't come down to
arguing
a
that the
coin
best
toss.
team didn't win. We're
Shouldn't come
arguing
down to
how
a
the game
50-50
ended.
coin toss.
Don't you agree that the
Like,
game ended?
Just
like,
as a
let me
fan.
ask-
Cheaters'
all right,
eyes.
all right, fine. Let me ask you all this. Then how can this change in the future? Because it's not going to change. That's
I'll tell
the
you.
refs
I'll
are the
tell
ones-
you. I'll tell you
They're
right
way
now.
down, yeah.
They have to restrict refs' power in the 2 minutes.
how can
Do-
we do that?
All right, how about
Give us
this? How about
challenges
this?
in the 2 minutes.
Either
Give us
that or how about
challenges.
this? In the last 5 minutes of of playoff games, the refs, I don't think anybody watching the game who's an actual fan would care if they stopped the game for like 60 seconds. If somebody called in the ref's ear and said, "Hold on, don't make the call yet. Let us talk about this up in New York." I don't think anybody would care if they took the 60 seconds. Yes, we don't want to interrupt the play, but in the last 5 minutes of playoff games, that you can't let this happen.
But there has
So
to be a reason
anybody
they do that.
upstairs, there should be a group of people upstairs that are like, nope, reverse that. Don't pick up that flag because you haven't been calling it all game. We dictated how the game was going to be played, and this is deviating from that.
But there has to be a reason why they don't allow that. Do we know why?
Yeah, because
This is
Because-
because on every play. Otherwise,
Control.
yeah, you could call anything.
so like we can be. This is what we talked about last year. And again, I like Mahomes. I like Reed. Like Andy Reid was a Eagles coach for years. I love him. He got us to our Super Bowl against the Patriots. One of my first human memories. But I said this last year. Like there's going to be trade offs to every solution, but we're crazy that we don't have these cameras. Like if Greg Olson in the booth in the moment can be like, yeah, just let him play. We could have a New York the same way they say, hey, let's review that in New York. Same thing.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, you haven't been calling that all game. Let him play. It's not clear and obvious. It's not egregious. Like have someone that sits above the refs, so the refs aren't in total control determining the outcomes of these games,
Well, it's
regardless
almost
of
like
whether
that
it's
situa-
against the Chiefs or for the Chiefs.
Well,
The problem
Caleb,
is not the Chiefs. Get out of the Chiefs games. It's the problem is that the officiators have no accountability.
Caleb, in that situation, if the ref had called it and then they called New York and said, "Hey, I just called this flag," they're not going to cancel it because it was actually a hold. They're going to, okay, you're right, that was a hold, right? That
That's-
wouldn't.
But it's the level of the hold.
They've picked
So
up
they wouldn't.
flags
They
before.
wouldn't have said, "Hey, this is a Super
Well, that's
Bowl."
the-
Have
Yeah,
they
it's
never
just like-
picked up flags?
But no, but by that energy,
Because-
they should call everything then. If rules are rules, and they should be able. If we have the ability,
If they
to
see it,
if they see it, they should call it. Then we have cameras on every position of the field, and they see everything. So let's
You can't-
call everything because
I
every
can't tell you how
camera
many
sees it.
times. I can't tell you how many times in high school there's been a lot of flags and stuff, but in the the coaches yelled at refs, "Did you not see that?" And they're like, "Yeah, I didn't see it." And
Yeah,
what
yeah.
can
That's
you do? They
high
didn't see it.
school. There's the refs.
We
There's
have
not as
cameras
many
that see
refs on the
everything.
field.
The reason why we can't use that argument is because cameras see everything. If they had a group of referees
So,
watching every
Then
matchup,
you,
there'd be a
then that's not
penalty on
fair.
every play.
Exactly. Then you can go on the camera and see literally any penalties. I'm sure there's
That's
penalties.
the problem.
all
That's the
time-
problem. Let them
all the
play.
time.
Like the
But
purpose
Jonathan,
of the rules
there's
is
a
not to
reason
be enforced
there-
like a textbook.
the-
The purpose is
The
to
NFL
ensure
has
fair play.
the NFL has enough money to put
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
22 refs on the field and
choose
say,
not
"All right,
to.
each of you watch one person."
That's gonna slow the game.
But
down.
there's a reason. Exactly. There's
Right,
a
that's
reason
the
we
problem
don't
we're
do
talking
it.
about. Like they could call everything and it slows the
That's
game
why they
down,
call the
or
big.
it could,
They're trained to call the big plays, the game changing plays. That whip route is again. That's a sensitive route. They're trained to do that. They're not trained to call those
Even
every
if it's
single
a whip-
thing. Like it's tough. It's tough.
route or
guys.
any route. It could be a Hail Mary. Like if that's a
But Jonathan,
the purpose
also
is
what I'm
calling it.
saying, is that was the only penalty all game on a defensive back, on a
Yeah,
cornerback
that's a
or
pretty good
safety.
game.
So what you're saying is that was the worst hold that any cornerback had the entire
only
game.
one they
I
saw the whole
highly, yeah,
That was a
the worst
game-changing-
one of anyone that they saw. That's
That
that's
was a game
absurd.
impacting
That's
play.
impossible.
That was a
That's
game impacting-
impossible.
You can't say
That was-
they didn't see. There was either no other holding that bad or worse, or that's the first one they saw the whole game.
That was
That's
a
the
game
argument
impacting
you're-
play.
So
They-
either they're stupid or they're blind.
So they
Which
didn't
one is
see
it?
any
That
of
was a
them, or
game-
there wasn't any
Three
other
blind
ones?
mice.
Which one is it? Which one is it? Were there no other penalties of that kind, or was this the first one they saw?
I mean, that was a game impacting play number one and number two.
It was,
yeah,
but
that's-
which one of
they
the
clearly
two I'm
saw?
offering?
It was a man. They clearly saw that. That guy, he had black gloves
Caleb,
on a white
Caleb,
jersey.
he doesn't
You
know.
gotta-
He can't
you gotta-
answer. He doesn't know the answer.
You
Were
got
there
Jonathan,
no
just
other-
answer the question.
You have
Were
to
they
wear white.
blind, or was it the first one that they?
Was it the first one they
I'm
saw,
telling
or
you.
were there no other ones in the game?
You have to wear white gloves on a white jersey. He didn't do that. I'm telling you why. It was man. He clearly saw it. He's wearing black gloves. He held him. He's like, okay, I have to call it. I see it. You see what I'm saying? And he saw Patrick Mahomes looking that way. There was only it was single.
So you're
receivers,
saying they're blind? They didn't see any of the other plays?
right? Maybe, probably not. Probably not.
Jonathan,
don't know.
It's okay. No, this has been fun, Jonathan. We can you
Probably
can drop
not.
the act. We can
See what
You
I'm
don't
saying?
have to be the. We can,
And so
yeah,
it's tough
fun.
to it's tough to like
we
this
can
is how
talk.
I'm saying that there's no way you can change this in the future. The only way is to don't put it in the refs' hands. You got to dominate your opponent because going forward, the refs can do what they want. We can't say, oh, put
But
more
that's
refs
not
on the field.
fair.
It's gonna
That's
slow the
not
game down.
fair.
You can't say go review every single play to see any tiny little small penalty. We can't do that. It's gonna slow the game down. It's not gonna make it fun anymore. This is how it's gonna be. So
This
in order to
isn't
prevent
fun.
this,
No, we can.
Eagles
NFL's
should have
enough
dominated like
money
they
to-
did. The Eagles should have dominated like they did the other games. If this happened, then and they were dominating, it wouldn't matter. See what I'm saying?
This is
And
part of the
so-
game, though. It goes both ways.
But the
Mahomes,
Chiefs-
Chiefs shouldn't have let
Yeah,
it go
the-
that bad either to start off. Like that's the other
Yeah.
argument.
Yeah, exactly.
They got
the
bailed
Chiefs have been
out.
getting lucky. Hey, the Chiefs have been getting lucky. We all know that. They've been getting lucky for
No,
some
they're a
reason.
good
But
team.
you don't.
I'm
It's
not
lucky.
the Bengals
It's like
fan, or it's like all luck. It's just the
But
problem
Ra-
is too much power.
Having the
You know?
refs be on your side shouldn't be.
it's
part
not the
of
refs on their
luck.
side. They're doing their.
It overshadowed. No one
They're
can
doing their
make the
best.
argument that the Chiefs alone sealed the game. Like that's what overshadows it for me. Like
And they were already in
Eagles
field goal
made
range.
mistakes.
We're not
Chiefs were-
saying they should have lost,
Yeah,
but
they would've
that's a
scored a
little
field goal to go
unfair
up.
that they get a second chance and the Eagles don't.
Second
After-
chance. The
Yeah.
Eagles had. The
Yeah.
Eagles had a long. They had a
Well, they had
possession
four
game.
more
So did the
chances.
Chiefs.
Let me
So
see
did
this.
the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And they couldn't score a touchdown to put it away.
They got
What
held
are you
to a
There
talking
were
field
about?
goal.
there were many opportunities for the Chiefs to put it away. They did. And they went 3 and out like 3 or 4 times. That's why
They
their
had an
possession
8-point
was so low.
8-point lead, and they
35
gave it up
minutes. The Eagles had the ball 35 minutes.
That's-
The
a little
Chiefs
over
had
half of the game.
24. Chiefs had it 24.
Yeah, no, efficiency matters. But it's just it comes down to football. Like, what's good for football? I think
And-
we have enough
can-
cameras. We can update the rules. It's a business. Like people came up with these things. We can be creative and have solutions. Like the overtime rules.
72 plays. 72 plays for the Eagles. Yeah, guys, look, the Eagles had plenty of opportunities to put this away. I understand where you're coming from, where it's tough for the game to end like that, but it happened. That was Bradbury's fault. He shouldn't have done it. And
But it could have easily happened to the Eagles, and then the Eagles win off of the Chiefs. That's the whole scheme of it, what we're talking about. Is like that's not right. That
How's it not
we're
right?
basically saying, oh, so since this is a close game, the penalty for that is that the refs are going to be really watching for a penalty. Oh, got it right there, penalty. Like, oh, sorry, you should have
like
won
this-
by more.
That's a game-impacting
That's not
play.
fair.
Hey, that's a
Yeah,
game
That's
impacting
so
play.
not fair.
The problem is if they see it, they call it, right? But
So they're
we can
like,
see
oh,
everything. So why don't they call
Make sure you
everything? It's
play
'cause it's
perfect
down
because
the
these
game.
refs suck. So
Yeah.
play perfect and don't leave it in their hands.
Be
That
consistent.
shouldn't even be part of it. The refs shouldn't even be a part of the game plan.
And if
that's
that was
the
the case,
problem.
then if that was the case, then it would be easy for defenses to stop offenses. That's not fair. That's not fair. You can't just say, "Oh, let them play." The receiver's trying to get open. See what I'm saying?
It
A
wasn't
small little skinny receiver
egregious,
getting
though.
bullied by a cornerback. Like,
Did
what
he
can do?
fall? Did he get pulled back? No, he was
Juju didn't even
fine.
realize, man.
He
Juju
couldn't
was like,
run.
"Oh,
Didn't
what?
realize.
Mahomes is pointing
I
at
think-
me? Pointing at
Well,
me?"
as we wrap
Yeah.
up a little bit, like I guess what sucks is what this whole podcast was about, a penalty, and like that's what kind of sucks. And it's like we
Yes.
need to have a whole nother podcast
because
talking about the
I like that
plays.
this exists because
we-
we'll Josh, Jonathan, you genuinely believe these things I was playing. You know, this is fun debate. We are during debate. As an Eagles fan, this might be cathartic. As a fan of the game, people might find allegiances to either side.
On that note, we can wrap this podcast up. Can we get a round of applause because we just finished season 3 of the Dorm Debate podcast? Woo! Round of applause.
John, shout out to John for joining us despite your illness. I know it was tempting
He
this
couldn't.
debate.
He couldn't.
I-
He heard
I-
Jonathan through my headphones. He
I
was
was-
like, no, "I gotta do it, man. I gotta get on."
I was
This is like-
typing my long message of what I was gonna have you guys read out for me, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it.
You sound good. I appreciate you toughing through. I know the sinus stuff sucks, but this just reminds me of our why we call it dorm debate is like two of us would start talking something football and then the doors would open to our apartment and then we'd all kind of like start to meander in.
Thank you guys so much for watching and listening throughout the course of this season. It was amazing. We'll definitely be making videos in the off season, but to cap off this 2022-2023 season with the Super Bowl recap podcast, it's pretty awesome, and everyone got to join. So thank you guys again for watching and listening. Please hit that subscribe button, and make sure you go follow our TikTok at Dorm Debate Podcast and our Instagram at Dorm Debate Podcast. Thank you guys again, and we will see you guys maybe not next week, but in the near future. We'll be coming out with the video. Yeah, stay tuned.